Part IV, Chapters 5 and 6 of Charles Rex by Ethel M. Dell. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. 5. The Dance of Death. "We will watch from the gallery," said Saltash. Toby looked up at him with quick gratitude. "There won't be so many people there," she said. He frowned at her, but his look was quizzical. "But everyone will know that Lady Saltash is present, with her husband," he said. She slipped a persuasive hand onto his arm. "King Charles," she said, "let us leave Paris." "Bored?" said Saltash. Her face was slightly drawn. "No, no. Only—" she paused. Then suddenly flashed him her swift smile. "Let it be as you wish," she said. He flicked her cheek in his careless, caressing way. "Shall I tell you something, mignonne? We are going very soon." Her eyes shone, more blue than the frock she wore. She stooped impulsively, and touched his hand with her lips, then, as though she feared to anger him, drew quickly away. "Shall we go on to the yacht?" she asked, eagerness half suppressed in her voice. "Yes," said Saltash, and he spoke with finality, even with a certain grimness. Toby's face lighted up for a second, and then clouded again. She glanced at him doubtfully. "If Paris amuses you," she ventured. "Paris does not amuse me," said Saltash emphatically. "Have a cigarette, ma chère, while I go and dress." "Can I help you dress?" said Toby, with a touch of wistfulness. "I have put everything ready." His odd eyes flashed her a smile. "Not here, chérie, not now. Perhaps when we get on the yacht again." He was gone, leaving the sentence unfinished, leaving Toby looking after him with the wide eyes of one who sees at last a vision long desired. She stretched out both her arms as the door closed upon him, and her lips repeated very softly the words that he had last uttered. "Perhaps when we got on a yacht again." When they went down to the great salle à manger, a little later, her face was flushed and her smile ready, though she glanced about her in a shy, half furtive fashion as they entered. They found a secluded table reserved for them in a corner, and her eyes expressed relief. She shrank into it as if she would make herself as small as possible. Again no one accosted them, though a good many looked in their direction. Saltash was far too well known a figure to pass unnoticed in any fashionable crowd. But the general attention did not centre upon them. That was absorbed by a far greater attraction that night. She sat at the end of the room like a queen holding her court, and beside her sat the Viking, stern-faced and remote of mien, as supremely isolated as though he sat with her on a desert island. He spoke but seldom, and then to her exclusively; but when he spoke, she turned to him the radiant face of the woman who holds within her grasp her heart's desire. She was superbly dressed in many shaded blue, and jewels sparkled with every breath she drew. Above her forehead there nestled in the gold of her hair a single splendid diamond that burned like a multicolored flame. She was at the acme of her triumph that night. Of all who knew her there was not one who had seen her thus. They watched her almost with bated breath. She was like a being from another world. She transcended every expectation of her. The band played only dance music, by her desire, it was said; but such music as wrought irresistibly upon the senses and emotions. She was preparing her audience for what should follow. Throughout the meal excitement was steadily rising. There was almost a feeling of delirium in the air. Before the bulk of diners had finished, she rose to go. Her cavalier rose with her, flinging her gauzy wrap of blue and gold over his arm. It was the signal for a demonstration. In a moment a youth with eyes ablaze with adoration sprang on to a table in the centre of the vast room, with a glass of red wine held high. "Arroselle! Arroselle!" The cry went up to the domed roof in a great crescendo of sound, and instantly the place was a pandemonium of shouting, excited figures. They crowded towards the table at which the danseuse still stood. And just for a second, one fleeting second, her eyes showed a curious fear. She stood almost as one at a loss. Then, in a flash, her irresolution was gone. Her beautiful face smiled its own inimitable smile. The music of her laughter rang silvery through the tumult. She made a dainty gesture of acceptance, of acknowledgment, of friendly appreciation; then lightly she turned to go. Her companion made a path for her. He looked as if he could have hewn his way through a wall of rock at that moment, and his uncompromising bearing gained him respect. No one attempted to gainsay him. They were gone almost before they realized that their idol had not spoken a word to them. The moment was past, and the excitement died down to a buzz of talk. "An amazing woman," said Saltash. Toby glanced at him and said nothing. She had watched the whole episode from her corner with eyes that missed nothing, but she had not spoken a word. He bent suddenly towards her. "Drink some wine, chérie. You are pale." She started a little at the quick peremptoriness of his speech. She lifted her glass to drink, and splashed some of the wine over. He leaned farther forward, screening her from observation. "Go on, drink," he said with insistence, and in a moment his hand closed upon hers, guiding the wine to her lips. She drank obediently, not meeting his look, and he took the glass from her and set it down. "Now we will go. Are you ready?" She rose, and he stood aside for her. As she passed him his hand closed for an instant upon her bare arm in a grasp that was close and vital. She threw him a quick upward glance, but still she said no word. They passed out through the throng of diners almost unobserved, but in the corridor Spentoli leaned against a pillar smoking a long black cigar. He made no movement to intercept them, but his eyes with their restless fire dwelt upon the girl in a fashion that drew her own irresistibly. She saw him, and slightly paused. It was the pause of the hunted animal that sees its retreat cut off, but in an instant Saltash's voice, very cool, arrogantly self-assured, checked the impulse to panic. "Straight on to the lift, ma chère. See, it is there in front of you. There will be no one in the gallery. Go straight on." She obeyed him, instinctively as her habit was, but in the lift she trembled so much that he made her sit down. He stood beside her in silence, but once lightly his hand touched her cheek. She moved then, swiftly, convulsively, and caught it in both her own. But the next moment he had gently drawn it free. The gallery that ran round three sides of the great salon was deserted. There was only one point at the far end whence a view of the stage that had been erected for the dancer could be obtained. Towards this Saltash turned. "We shall see her from here," he said. The place was but dimly illumined by the flare of the many lights below, two great crystal candelabra that hung at each end being left unlighted. Under one of these was a settee which Saltash drew forward to the balcony. "No one will disturb us here," he said. "We can smoke in peace." He offered her his cigarette case, but she refused it nervously, sitting down in a corner of the settee in the crouched attitude of a frightened creature seeking cover. The band was playing in the salon now, and people were beginning to crowd in. Saltash leaned back in his corner and smoked. His eyes went to and fro ceaselessly, yet the girl beside him was aware of a scrutiny as persistent as if they never left her. She sat in silence, clasping and unclasping her hands, staring downwards at the shining stage. Very soon the salon was full of people, and the lights were lowered there while on the stage only a single shaft of blinding violet light remained, shooting downwards from the centre. Toby's eyes became fixed upon that shaft of light. She seemed to have forgotten to breathe. The band had ceased to play. There fell a potent silence. The multitude below sat motionless, as if beneath a spell. And then she came. No one saw her coming. She arrived quite suddenly, as though she had slid down that shaft of light. And she was there before them, dancing, dancing like a winged thing in the violet radiance. Not a sound broke the stillness save a single wandering thread of melody that might have come from the throat of a bird. Soft, fitful, but half awake in the dawning. The violet light was merging imperceptibly into rose, the unutterable rose of the early morning. It caught the dancing figure, and she lifted her beautiful face to it and laughed. The gauzy scarf streamed out from her shoulders like a flame, curving, mounting, sinking, now enveloping the white arms, now flung wide in a circle of glittering splendour. A vast breadth went up from the audience. She held them as by magic. All save one, who leaned back in his corner with no quickening of the pulses, and watched the girl beside him sitting motionless with her blue eyes wide and fixed, as though they gazed upon some horror from which there was no escape. The rose light deepened to crimson. She was dancing now in giddy circles like a many-colored moth dazzled by the dawn. The melody was growing. Other bird voices were swelling into sound, a wild and flute-like music of cadences that came and went, elusive as the laughter of wood-nymphs in an enchanted glade. And every one of that silent crowd of watchers saw the red light of dawn breaking through the trees of a dream forest that no human foot had ever trod. Slowly the crimson lightened. The day was coming, and the silent flitting moth of night was turning into a butterfly of purest gold. The scarf still floated about her like a gold-edged cloud. The giddy whirl was over. She came to rest, poised, quivering in the light of the newly risen sun, every line of her exquisite body in the accord of a perfect symmetry. Yes, she was amazing. She was unique. Wherever she went the spell still held. But to-night she was as one inspired. She did not see her spell-bound audience. She was dancing for one alone. She was as a woman who waits for her lover. In some fashion this fact communicated itself to her worshippers. They guessed that somewhere near that dazzling figure the stranger whom no one knew was watching. Insensibly, through the medium of the dancer, his presence made itself felt. When that wonderful dance of the dawn was over, and the thunder of applause had died away, they looked around, asking who and where he was. But no one knew, and though curiosity was rife, it seemed unlikely that it would be satisfied that night. Up in the gallery Toby drew a deep breath as one of coming out of a trance, and turned towards the man beside her. The light had been turned on in the salon below, and it struck upwards on her face, showing it white and weary. "She has found another victim," she said. "It seems so," said Saltash. She looked at him in the dimness. "Did you know that Captain Larpent was with her?" "No," said Saltash. He leaned forward abruptly, meeting her look with a sudden challenge. "Did you?" She drew back sharply. "Of course not. Of course not. What should I know about her?" He leaned back again without comment, and lighted another cigarette. At the end of several seconds of silence, Toby spoke again, her locked fingers pulling against each other nervously. "I wonder, do you mind, if I go soon? I am rather tired." The lights went out as she spoke, and Saltash's face became invisible. He spoke quite kindly, but with decision, out of the darkness. "After this dance, ma chère, if you desire it." The music began. Weird and mournful, and a murmur went round among the eager watchers. It was her most famous dance. The dance of death. The most gruesome spectacle, so it was said, that any dancer had ever conceived. She came on to the stage like the flash of an arrow, dressed in black, that glittered and scintillated with every amazing movement. And then it began. That most wonderful dance of hers that all the world was mad to see. It was almost too rapid for the eye to follow in its first stages. A fever of movement, a delirium indescribable, a fantasy painful to watch, but from which no watcher could turn away. Even Saltash, who had taken small interest in the previous dance, leaned forward and gave his full attention to this, as it were in spite of himself. The very horror of it was magnetic. They seemed to look upon a death struggle, the wild fight of a creature endowed with a fiery vitality against an enemy unseen, but wholly ruthless, and from the first invincible. Those who saw that dance of Roselle d'Aubigny never forgot it, and there was hardly a woman in the audience who was not destined to shudder whenever the memory of it arose. It was arresting, revolting, terrible. It must have compelled in any case. A good many began to sob with the sheer nervous horror of it, yearning for the end upon which they were forced to look, though with a dread that made the blood run cold. But the end was such as no one in that assembly looked for. Just as the awful ecstasy of the dance was at its height, just as the dreaded crisis approached, and they saw with a gasping horror the inevitable final clutch of the unseen enemy upon his vanquished victim, just as she lifted her face in the last anguish of supplication, yielding the last hope, sinking in nerveless surrender before the implacable destroyer, there came a sudden flare of light in the salon, and the great crystal candelabra that hung over the end of the gallery where the man and the girl were seated watching became a dazzling sparkle of overwhelming light. Everyone turned towards it instinctively, and Toby, hardly knowing what she did, but with the instinct to escape strong upon her, leapt to her feet. In that moment, as she stood in the full light, the dancer's eyes also shot upwards and saw the slim young figure. It was only for a moment, but instantly a wild cry rang through the great salon, a cry of agony so piercing that women shrieked and trembled, hiding their faces from what they knew not what. In the flash of a second the light was gone, the gallery again in the darkness. But on the stage a woman's voice cried thrice, "'Toinette! 'Toinette! 'Toinette!" in the anguished accents of a mother who cries for her dead child, and then fell into a tragic silence more poignant than any sound, a silence that was as the silence of death. And in that silence a man's figure, moving with the free athletic swing of a sailor, crossed the stage to where the dancer lay huddled in the dimness like a broken thing, lifted her, bore her away. 6. The New Lover. Very late that night, when all the crowd who had assembled to watch Roselle d'Aubigny had dispersed with awestruck whisperings, two men came down the great staircase into the empty vestibule and paused at the foot. "You are leaving Paris again?" said Saltash. The other nodded, his face perfectly emotionless, his eyes the eyes of a sailor who searches the far horizon. "There is nothing to keep me here," he said, and absently accepted a cigarette from the case that Saltash proffered. "I have always hated towns. I only came—" He stopped, considered a moment, and said no more. Saltash's eyes were upon him, alert, speculative, but wholly without malice. "You came because you were sent for," he said. Larpent nodded twice thoughtfully, more as if in an answer to some mental suggestion than as if the words had been actually uttered. He struck a match and held it for Saltash. Then, as he deliberately lighted his own cigarette between slow puffs, he spoke. "There was only one reason on earth that would have brought me." "Yes?" said Saltash. He dropped into a chair with the air of a man who has limitless leisure at his disposal, but his tone was casual. He did not ask for confidence. Larpent stood still gazing before him through the smoke with keen, unwavering eyes. "Only one reason," he said again, and still he seemed to speak as one who communes with his inner soul. "She was dying, and she wanted me." He paused a moment, and an odd tremor went through him. "After 20 years," he said, as if in wonder at himself. Saltash's look came swiftly upwards. "I've heard that before," he said. "Those she caught, she kept, always. No other woman was ever worth while after Roselle." Larpent's hand clenched instinctively, but he said nothing. Saltash went on in the same casual tone. "She never caught me, mon ami. I met her too late in life, when I was beginning to get fastidious." His monkey-like grin showed for a moment. "I appreciated her charm, but it left me cold." "You never saw her in her first youth," said Larpent, and into his fixed eyes there came a curious glow, the look of a man who sees a vision. "What was she like, then?" said Saltash. Slowly the sailor answered him, word by word, as one spelling out a strange language. "She was like a butterfly that plays among the flowers in the early morning. She had the look of a boy. The wide open eyes, the fearless way, the freedom, the daring. Her innocence, her loveliness—" Something rose unexpectedly in his throat. He stopped and swallowed hard. "My God, how lovely she was!" he said in a strangled voice. Saltash got up in his sudden elastic fashion. "Look here, you want a drink. Sit down while I get you one." He was gone with the words, not waiting for the half-uttered remonstrance that the other man sent after him. Larpent stood staring heavily before him for a space, then turned with a mechanical movement and dropped into a chair. He was sitting so, bent forward, his hands clasped in front of him, when Saltash returned. He had the worn, grey look of a man tired out with hard travel. Saltash poured out a drink and held it down to him. "Here's the stuff. Drink, man. It'll put new life into you." Larpent drank, still in that slow, mechanical fashion. But as he drained the glass his eyes met Saltash's alert look, and a faint, grim smile crossed his haggard features. "Don't let me spoil your holiday, my lord," he said. "Don't be a damn fool," said Saltash. Larpent sat in silence for several seconds. Then in a more normal tone he spoke again. "I had to come to her. God knows what made her want me after all these years. But I couldn't refuse to come. I had her message 2 days ago. She said she was alone. Dying. So I came." He paused and wiped his forehead. "I thought she had tricked me. You saw her as she was to-night. She was like that, full of life, superb. But I had come to her, and I found I couldn't leave her. She wanted me to take her back." He got up, but not with any agitation, and began to pace to and fro as though he paced a deck. "You will think me mad, of course. You never came under the spell. But I was first with her. And perhaps it was fitting that I should be the last. Had she lived, after to-night, I would have taken her away. She would never have danced again. I would have taken her out of this damnable world that had dragged her down. I'd have saved her somehow." "You wouldn't," said Saltash. "It's like a recurrent fever. You'd never have held her." "I say I would." Larpent spoke deeply, but still without emotion. "I could have done it. And no one else on earth. I tell you I was first with her, and a woman doesn't forget the first. I had a power that no other man ever possessed, or ever could possess. I was her husband." "What?" said Saltash. Larpent paced on with bent head. "I was her husband. But I was at sea and she was on shore. And so I lost her. She was not made to stand against temptation. It came to her when I was on the other side of the world. When I got back, she was gone. And I never followed her. The thing was hopeless. She was that sort, you understand. It was first one, and then another with her. I dropped her out of my life and let her go. I didn't realize then, what I know now, that the power to rescue and to hold her was mine. If I had, I might have gone after her. I can't say. But I was too bitter at the time to feel it was worth while. I went back to the sea and left her to work out her own damnation." "And yet you loved her," Saltash said, with a queer twist of the features that was not of mirth. "I loved her, yes. If I hadn't loved her I would never have come to her when she called. That is love. The thing that doesn't die." A sudden throb sounded in Larpent's voice. He paused for a moment in his walk, then paced on. "You may laugh at it, call it what you will, but there is a power on the earth that is stronger than anything else, and when that power speaks we have got to obey. I didn't want to come. You think me a damn fool for coming. But I had to. That's all there is to it." "I don't think you any sort of a fool," Saltash threw in briefly. "You did the only thing possible." "Yes, the only thing. I came to her. If I hadn't come, she'd have died alone. But that alone wasn't why she sent for me. It was the primary reason, but not the only one. There was another." Larpent ceased his pacing and deliberately faced the man who stood listening. "You know what happened to-night," he said. "That child. The Scaramouche you picked out of the gutter at Valrosa. Toby, do you realize, have you grasped, the meaning of that yet?" Saltash flung up his head with an arrogant gesture. "There is one thing about her you have not grasped," he said. "But go on. I may as well hear it." Larpent went on steadily. "When I came to her yesterday, she told me of a child that had been born to her, a child she had loved but had been unable to protect. It was a long story. Spentoli, the Italian artist, knows it from beginning to end. You know Spentoli?" "I know him," said Saltash. "Spentoli is a blackguard," Larpent said. "The sort that is born, not made afterwards. He has painted Roselle over and over again. He raves about her. He may be a genius. He is certainly mad. He wanted the child for a model, and Roselle could not prevent it. So she told me. I believe she was dependent upon him at the time. She had been ill. She has been ill for years with heart trouble. And so he had the child, but only for a time. The girl had a will of her own and broke away, joined a circus in California. He tracked her down, captured her again, tried to make a slave of her. But she was like a wild creature. She stabbed him one night and fled. That was Roselle's trouble. She had never been able to hear of her again. She begged me to find and save her. I promised to do my best. But there was no need to search very far. To night Spentoli pulled the wires again. It was he who switched on that light. It was he who killed Roselle. The girl in the gallery with you, Toby, was her daughter and mine. You heard Roselle cry out when she saw her. She never spoke again." Larpent ceased to speak. He was no longer looking at Saltash. The far vision seemed to have caught his gaze again. He stared beyond. Saltash watched him with working brows. "Are you wanting to lay claim to the girl?" he asked abruptly. Larpent's face was grim. "I make no claim, my lord," he said. "But I have sworn to do my best for her. I shall keep that oath of mine." "Meaning?" said Saltash. The sailor's look met his squarely. "You know what I mean," he said. Saltash began to grin. "A fight to a finish, what? I'm sorry, mon ami. But I've got you beaten at the start. Shall I tell you how you can best keep that somewhat rash oath of yours?" "Well?" The word fell brief and uncompromising. Larpent's face was as carved granite. Saltash thrust forth a sudden hand and took him by the shoulder. "Just by effacing yourself, mon vieux," he said lightly. "Go back to the Blue Moon, take her to Fair Harbor, and await my orders there." It was carelessly, even jestingly spoken, but a certain authority lurked behind the words. Charles Rex knew how to assert his kingship upon occasion, knew also how to temper it with a touch of friendship. Larpent's look did not waver, but some of the grimness went away from it. Neither anger nor indignation had any place here. He continued to look Saltash straight in the face. "And that would be keeping my oath," he said. "Even so," said Saltash. "You mean," Larpent spoke with slow emphasis, "that to leave her where she is now, is to leave her in safe and honorable keeping?" The old mocking smile gleamed in Saltash's eyes. "Yes, I mean that," he said. "Do you believe me, Larpent?" "Believe you, my lord?" Larpent seemed to hesitate. The hand that held him moved with a hint of impatience. "I am asking," said Saltash royally, "if you consider that my protection is adequate for my wife." "Your wife?" Larpent started in sharp surprise. "Your wife, did you say?" Saltash broke into a chuckle and dropped his hand from his captain's shoulder. "Yes, just that," he said. "You are behind the times, my friend. Are you going to congratulate me? We were married 4 days ago." Larpent's hand came out to him abruptly. "It's the best thing you've ever done, my lord," he said. "And you will never regret it." "What makes you say that?" said Saltash curiously. Their hands gripped and fell apart. Larpent answered him in the brief fashion of the man whose words are few. "Mainly because you loved her enough to marry her when you could have had her without." Saltash's laugh had the old derisive ring, but there was no corresponding gleam of mockery in his eyes as he turned carelessly aside. "What is this thing called love?" he said. End of Part 4, Chapters 5 and 6.